Hey guys, this is Ryan.
And I'm Tucker.
And you know who I am, Jeff.
Everybody knows Mr. Jeff. Everybody wants to be like Mr. Jeff. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about mid-length boards versus downwind boards. Absolutely. So we've been riding a lot of different models out there. If you see it in our shop, we've probably ridden it, all three of us even, and compared it to some of the other stuff. So this is a long time coming, but want to make sure we got a nice in-depth experience to bring you guys our thoughts on this, because downwind boards for light wind winging, downwind boards in general really, and then hybrid boards or mid-length boards are kind of what's hot in winging right now. But there's a lot of mud getting slung around. You know, not everyone really understands the application of each of those and what it might mean for your experience out there and the rest of your quiver, and how it coincides with that. So that's what we're here to talk about today, and how to make the right decision for yourself.
Yeah, trying to give some pros and cons, and to help you as the customer with all these great innovations and newness. It's really about getting on the water and riding. And depending on where you live, you're going to hear some of these themes as we talk about the gear today. A lot of this is, obviously our sport is wind driven and condition driven. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about, the positives and negatives, will be fit into based on where you ride mostly and what would make the best choice. Another thing I like to frame this discussion, because we had a really good discussion this morning about it, we're going to kind of have a discussion point here about this, is this video that we're going to get into with the hybrid versus the light wind board or the downwind boards can be for the customers, and we have a lot of them who just bought their beginner gear and now have kind of mastered their beginner gear, their intro to winging gear. They're up and riding, and you know, you're not getting wet as much, not falling as much, maybe staying up on the water 20-35 minutes. So what we're going to get into is for you, and it's also for the rider that, you know, that's been riding for a few years, and maybe they're ready to change their board or buy some new gear, and they're trying to decide, should I go to a 1 board or 2 board, or should I buy a 1 foil or 2 foil? So I feel this discussion is going to be for those that are, we want to set the preface, this isn't for someone that's new to the sport and never ridden before, but it is for someone that's been in the sport already for a year or months, depending on what your learning curve is, that we're hoping that this can be helpful for you as you make some decisions on gear.
That's right. So before we get into that, you might not even know what we're talking about here. Downwind boards, these boards are the longer, narrower boards. They almost look like a race paddleboard or a rocket ship. They're very pointed, very efficient, and what you get from that is a little bit more efficiency through the water. They're going to build speed and get to higher speeds well on the water with less drag. So maximum efficiency is really the name of the game for downwind paddleboards. As they're applied to winging, they're phenomenal for light wind. These boards are generally in excess of 6'6", even 7 to 8 foot long. So they're longer. That can be, you know, an issue for people transportation wise. You know, some people just don't like a board that big to swing around. I would argue it's not, you know, so much how long the board is, but how it moves.
That's what she said.
And what kind of conditions you're riding in and your riding style. But that's the downwind board. So they're much longer, typically narrower, and hull-shaped, sort of rocket ships for that maximum efficiency. And then
to piggyback on that before you do that real quick, the downwind comes from the word initially for like going on a downwind swell or paddling in, but we have found that in the wind market they can be used as a light wind board because they're so efficient. Yeah,
that's right. You get out there and ride in other conditions where your normal wingboard chicken nugget is just too draggy, too slow. It doesn't build enough.
I like the chicken nugget.
Speed on the water. It has too much drag. Yeah.
Good analogy there.
Wide and short.
Yeah.
Long and narrow.
Chicken nugget.
Long and narrow like me. Downwind board. We don't really have a short and squatty. Maybe no.
Yeah. So there's that. They've applied them to downwinding, to winging now. For light winds, and it really, I mean, it's amazing how light a wind you can get out there with the proper setup. And then an offshoot of that now has been kind of that in-betweener, right? Where you've got your chicken nugget, you got your rocket ship over here, and then, you know, we're somewhere in between, you know, and walking that line where you get a shorter, more maneuverable board.
You got your wagon.
Yeah, your hatchback.
Yeah, you got your hatchback.
And then, you know, also having that longer length, a little narrower waist, and more refined curves for that efficiency, but without so much board to move around. And realistically, that board lands kind of in between those two, depending on the size you're choosing and the model. But today we're going to talk about why you might choose a mid-length or hybrid, or why you might want to go full bore into the longer downwind style boards for light wind winging and as a one board quiver, and what kind of implications that has for your riding at your level, and what that might mean for your quiver and what kind of conditions you can realistically ride in. So let's jump into it.
I think a good place to start would be, let's say the customer or the rider that rides 90% of the time on an inland lake and may occasionally vacation and go to somewhere where there's waves or open water waves. But let's say and we have a lot of customers, like a growing, amount of customers that are getting into the sport that live by a lake or a reservoir. That aren't on the coast where there's swells. So maybe to frame it, let's start with that, and then we'll go to those that have access to both. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
As a frame to build off of? Suggestions? So Ryan, where would you land if you were thinking of a customer who is, like we said already, who is up and riding, not falling in the water as much, as is on their gear, and they're thinking, now should I go hybrid or should I do a downwind, and I ride mostly on an inland lake?
Yeah, we get a lot of that here. There's a lot of customers locally here that are hour and a half, 2 hours from Lake Michigan. They don't want to make the drive out all the time, or they just simply can't, because that's a lot of time to spend driving to and from. And so they're riding on their inland lake that's nearby, or maybe they live on it. And I would say most of those people around here, they're looking at under 15 knots. They're not seeing a whole lot of wind over 15 knots. And for that, I would push them towards a downwind board. Because, like you mentioned earlier, extremely efficient. You can really take advantage of the lightest winds possible. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking to ride in really anything that's under 15 all the way to as light as they can possibly go.
Yeah, it gives you that confidence to know if it's even somewhat windy, you're going to go and you're going to get a session. It gives you the confidence to go for it when you might go, maybe I'll take a nap, instead. No, you got a downwind board, it's blowing even a little bit, and you know what you're doing, you can make it happen. You can go out there and have a blast. You can go out there and push your progression a little bit, honestly, especially from an intermediate level. Work on your turns, work on your pumping, and not have to stress about, if I fall off foil, I'm not going to be able to get on foil, or I'm going to exhaust myself, trying to get back on foil and end up having to slog in and call it a day. Downwind boards are the absolute easiest. If you have even a little bit of a spit of wind, you can almost get up without even pumping. You just hold that sail. It's just stupid easy. So it gives you that confidence to go out there when otherwise you might stay at home. It's going to get you a lot more sessions in most locations. There's a lot of, we'll call it 8 to 15 knot wind in the world, especially when we're talking about inland lakes. It's gusty. There's big lulls. You want to be able to get on foil easily. You want to be able to cruise and gust hunt around, get yourself to the wind line without drifting, too far downwind. The downwind boards point upwind phenomenally. Even before you lift off on foil, you can stay on foil. You can stay upwind.
Taxi on pretty easy. And I think some customers may feel a little scared by the narrowness if you're going from a wider board to narrow, but because of its length, it does create stability from front to back. And once you find your foot position, you give yourself some practice, you can find that you can adapt to the width.
Yeah, that's right. Once you're moving, the width becomes a non-issue because you get that that momentum and the stability you get from the lift of the foil and just directional stability. The other thing people don't really realize a lot when you're talking about this, and I talk to people all the time, are like, man, it seems too narrow, too hard. A 30% decrease in width doesn't mean a 30% increase in difficulty. Really, the board design, the shape of the rails has a lot to do with the stability. The foil itself has a lot to do with the stability. So I don't even know what percentage to put on it, but a huge amount of the stability comes from the length of your mast and the wingspan and surface area of your foil. That's where the keel is. That's where the ballast is in the board, speaking in sailing terms. And then that compiled with the design. So designers know these narrower boards are going to be more unstable and hard to ride. So they build in stability into the design of the rail, into the rocker lines of these boards and how they feel, because stability is a goal of designers in a downwind board, because efficiency is not that efficient if you can't stay on the board. So
and that leads perfectly into the advantages of what Ryan led into. If you live on an inland lake, predominantly, I shouldn't say live, but ride predominantly on lakes or inland waterways, that downwind board is going to be more efficient to get up. And not only that, you might be able to get away with, when it does pick up, it's not going to hold you back that much. Because I know some guys we talk to that on a real raging days on their lake, they may get a little wave, like you know, knee high or mid thigh or even waist on some of these larger reservoirs. Yeah. You can still ride that board in those conditions and still enjoy your time.
Oh, I have a blast doing it all the time. Yeah. I ride up to 150 liters downwind boards, and I'm doing everything, you know, tip blows and hard turns and breaches and pumping and riding swell. I have a blast on those boards, and a lot of times in the light wind days, it's more so the hesitancy to fall off foil if you have a hard board to get on foil than it is the size of the board that's holding you back.
And the reason you're able to do that is the 8-foot board doesn't feel like an 8-foot board.
Correct.
Because the track is mounted more towards the center of the board than on your little chicken nugget.
Yeah, it's split between the difference, right? If this table is this long or that long, and the foil is mounted here, all that's in front of it. But if it's mounted here, it's split the difference between it. The other thing you get with downwind boards is lightweight is a real priority for the designers in the production. So they're a lot lighter per volume than a chicken nugget board that's really built and robust and stronger, you know, weight-wise, because it's not as much to swing around, it's not as much of a priority, but it's a huge priority for downwind boards to feel lightweight, so that the front half of those boards are much lighter pound for pound, inch for inch, as compared to any other board in the market. So it's less board to swing around. The width of the board is really crucial in how a board maneuvers and swings while it's on foil. We've been singing the praises of narrower boards for a long time now. Sure. And length is ease of use, width is performance.
And again, we're really trying to get people on the water and up and riding. So
yeah, the more you're riding, the better.
You're going to be able to adapt to its narrowness and the shape of it. And another advantage we have found, and I think we would all agree with this, we can speak to it a little bit, is you may not have to have multiple foils if you have the downwind board.
Yeah.
Because speed, obviously those of you that, you're listening to this because you're in the sport already and you understand that you need the wind because you need board speed. And why do you need board speed? Because you need certain speed to get your foil up and riding. And so with the downwind board, you can get away, I have found from my personal experience, with a foil, you know, I weigh around 175 pounds, so a foil right around 1,000 square centimeters, mid to higher aspect. And I can ride that in lighter wind because of my board aid. So a longer board helps make up for the speed.
And I would advocate it actually, because at some point, you know, bigger isn't better. You're adding more drag. So the board can't accelerate as efficiently. And then once you're on foil, having a more efficient foil really maximizes your apparent wind speed, your upwind ability, your glide. So riding a smaller foil with those more efficient boards, I think is easier. It's definitely more user-friendly.
And on inland lakes, it's going to help you get through those lulls.
Yep. That's a big You're going to be able to glide through the lulls. Yep, absolutely, because you'll build that apparent wind. You can just keep gliding through it. You usually don't even really notice it much. So,
we will say though, if you're cheating the low end, skill does come into play here a little bit. Obviously, when you're in lighter winds.
Always.
And so that's where you rely on your equipment, right, to make up for some of the lack of skill. So that long board is going to help, obviously, with the dynamics of getting up faster because of the speed it can generate. But you can try going with anything around 12, 13, 1400 as well on a downwind board if you're in lighter winds all the time in an inland waterway.
Yeah, bigger than that even. You know, there's not
1500, 1600, you can use that to get up and ride and stay up. But where you start to, if you go to the higher end of the span, square centimeters of the foil, you get a little more drag. It can reduce when you're trying to do your jibe and turn. Yeah. It can make it difficult in lighter wind.
Yeah, so through a lull.
Apparent wind.
Yeah, you get off the edge of the kind of funnel that you get in inland lakes and into some swirly wind. The the bigger foils are going to decelerate more quickly.
So to wrap up, if you have other questions about the downwind side, what size foil you should pair with it, give us a call. We can help with that.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale.
Yeah, we really want to focus on these two boards. We started now with the inland waterway. I think we both would agree with Ryan that if you're in inland water areas, lakes, reservoirs, with that gusty, lighter wind to higher wind, our choice, and we get to ride it all.
Yeah,
our choice for efficiency, getting you up and riding, and having fun on the water. The downwind board, also in the industry, we call them the light wind boards as well. The long, narrower canoe, kayak looking boards are gonna be the ticket.
Yeah. Even me as a more experienced rider, you know, not a budding intermediate, if I had to choose one board in a situation like that, it'd be a downwind board. Because if it's blowing 40, I can still ride that downwind board. If it's blowing 8, I can ride that downwind board and have a blast. It's getting me on the water more. It's realistically not holding back my progression that much in that setting. You know, really the only reason you'd need a smaller board than that or a shorter board than that in an inland lake scenario is if you're doing freestyle tricks, jumping, which, you know, is an option for you, but you're also not going to be doing a lot of jumping in under 15.
No, I agree with that. And we also, you know, want to emphasize too, if you're questioning about size of the downwind board that you should use, I think we may agree on this. Want to size up a little bit. You can't really go wrong. It's not like a race to the smallest downwind board for your inland lake or reservoir. You know, give yourself, you know, someone weighs like 175 to 185, 90 pounds. You know,
200 pounds.
200 pounds. So we're about from 170 to 200. We all would agree to go up to like 110 or 120 or go up. Versus we can ride in that 85 or 95 liter downwind board. But if it's going to be our one that we're going to use, size up. It's not going to hold you back.
Yeah, I would say at the very, 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 very least, your weight in kilograms and liters. Very least. That's arguably too small.
I would agree. Too small.
For me, at my weight in kilograms, I don't get my maximum light wind out of that. And that board at 95 liters compared to 120 liters, there's no discernible difference in performance. There's a huge difference in ease of use, light wind ability, and how easy it is to just slog around in that board.
Totally agree.
And get it up on foil and have fun. The other thing you get is you're a foiler, you're into winging, you're foiling, you got a downwind board of appropriate size. That unlocks the door to downwind paddling or downwind riding with another mode of propulsion, whether it's foil drive or a collapsible sail or wing or paddle, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Gorilla crawling your way up.
Hand paddles.
Anyway, to say that it's got a multi-use platform at that size where even if it's not blowing, you can go out and have a lot of fun. You know, trying to learn something new, and maybe you unlock that and bam, you already got your downwind board for those days where the conditions
and it
are
makes it a little easier when you're waiting for the wind to come up. If you're stuck out there,
so much easier.
You're standing there kind of like the old windsurfing days. You're just kind of sitting there waiting for that puff to get up and foil. So good. So let's shift now. If you're a rider that does ride in inland waterways a fair amount, but also you have access to open water and waves, are we saying, where would we suggest now? Is this where we feel the hybrid has its place?
Yeah, I think that's where the hybrid kind of makes its entry, where you want people that want a one board quiver that can do lighter winds fairly easy. They have an easily accessible ability, but also have some performance of some level on tap for average rider performance, you know, normal chest high waves, mellow waves, some basic jumps, you know, not flips, you know, at that point, but for your average, you know, intermediate, upper intermediate rider, the hybrid ticks a lot of boxes if you don't want a multiple board quiver. I would argue personally that if you are going to have two boards and you're even somewhat interested in riding on under 15 knots, you might as well go downwind. If there's restrictions on that, maybe you live in an area that, you know, yeah, we get a lot of 12 to 15, but not a lot of under 12. Or you're just dead set against a longer board for some reason. It's a mental thing, you know. you really feel the extra length for some reason. Maybe it's an issue with transportation, doesn't fit in the rig or whatever. That's where I think the hybrid makes a lot of sense for those type of riders, and also for those people that, you know, are at that advanced level. They have the skill set, they have the technique to get those mid-length boards going in slightly lighter winds.
Sure.
You know, maybe you already own a fairly big foil, so you don't need the efficiency of the downwind, or you're the type of rider that, you know, is doing those crazy things, but you want something that's going to work in lighter winds to do those things.
I think, Ryan, you've spent a fair amount, both of us, and I'll share mine in a moment, spent a lot of time on the hybrid mid-length boards. What's been your experience?
Yeah, that's pretty much my go-to for summer here in Michigan, because summer is pretty much always, with the exception of yesterday, we had a great day yesterday, but summer is pretty much always under 20. Like, rarely do we get anything that's around 20 plus during the summer. We're a lot of right around 15, maybe some high teen days, maybe some low teen days, and the mid-length takes care of all of that perfectly with, I would say, really not really any drawbacks there.
But you're not the type of guy to go when it's under 10.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily looking to ride under 10.
And you don't want to switch a lot of foils, so you're sticking with your same foil most of the time.
Yeah, I'm using the same 900, maybe 1,000 square centimeter foil, getting out there in 12, just maybe upsizing my wing to a 6 if I need to.
Catching some of that light swell and rollers that we have.
Yeah, any, you know, about as small swell as you can ride up to, I would say, chest shoulder high, the mid-lengths are great for. You can cruise that downwind swell, rip it around pretty good, not really any huge drawbacks there, but the big advantage is, compared to one of those chicken nugget boards, you can get out there on a day that's 12, maybe gusting to 13, and on a sinker board I might have to sit there and just wait for the wind line to even get up on my knees and try getting moving. And then you're spending a few seconds just to get that board up on top of the water, and then a few more seconds trying to get some speed and plane it out.
But I've also seen you go out though with that board when it gets, you know, 18, 19, 20, and you're not like disappointed that you're on it.
Right. So yeah, my point with the lighter wind stuff is you can hop up on the board and plane it out pretty quickly, and then when it gusts, you're ready to take advantage of that gust and take off. Whereas a smaller sinker board or higher performance board, you might miss that gust if it's a short gust, and you might be sitting out there for minutes at a time, whereas that mid-length, you can always get up on it.
Yeah.
There's no issue sitting there waiting around, wishing you had a bigger wing, foil, board, whatever. You're ready to go at all times in that sub 15. So that's where it's really nice here, because we get a lot of conditions where it looks like it's going to be a good day and below 15 to 20, and you get there and it's kind of hovering around 15, maybe knocks down a little bit, and the mid-length does awesome. And especially if it's a day where we get a little swell out there and you want to get out and ride, you can get out in those conditions. You can work on a few things, fall down, don't have to worry about not being able to get back up. You can pop right back up, whereas you might ride some swell, be way out there on a smaller board and fall, and you're sitting out there waiting for 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, and you're a pretty experienced rider too.
Yeah, he is.
He's been doing this a while.
Yeah.
If it was you, we'll say 6 months into your journey, do you think you'd still grab that mid-length, or do you think you'd gravitate more towards the downwind?
Well, that's a good question. 6 months in, I would say.
Well, we prefaced this riding already. They know how to ride, stay up for 30 minutes without falling in, and jiving, turning.
Yeah, and what I mean is Hooker's not coming out of the beginner stage. He's not a budding intermediate.
Yeah.
He's in the upper intermediate, early advanced stage at least.
It could be a year or two for some, so don't be. It can take more than 6 months, but if you have some skill.
I was saying, if I just started riding proficiently,
yeah,
which one would I gravitate towards? And I would probably lean towards downwind, because at that stage, the downwind is much easier when you're around that 15.
Yeah. Doesn't require as much technique.
Skill.
Right. Yeah. Yep. You can just grab the wing and you take off. Whereas with the mid-length board, you still have to have a little technique, a little skill, know what you're looking at. I mean, it takes just to look for the wind line and see when the gust's coming through. That takes a little bit of skill there, and that is going to play in factor. And I don't know that I've really other than the really light end of things on the downwind boards, I don't know that I've ever had to look for a wind line.
Yeah, yeah.
So my experience this summer, it's kind of been with Ryan's. The hybrid's been the hot ticket, so I got my hands on the Super K hybrid 70 liter, and I have been riding that in all conditions. So I've been kind of putting it through its ringer. I totally align with Ryan's thought process. Anything that's that above 10, 11 knots, the hybrid, I can make it work with the foil that I'd use, you know, on big days. But I've also been able to push the hybrids in big winds. Yesterday we had 32, 34 knots, and then the low end was 27, 28. Yep. And 3 of us got on. I was on my board I normally ride on, which is a 70 liter. I would say it's you know, gunny more board, and we had the KT Super K, which is 511, so a hybrid 70 liter, and it performed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was able to. We had like chest high, fast rolling swell, and I went from my go-to 70 shoulder board and back on the same kind of wind, swell, and speed. And I'd have to say, yes, I did like, you know, if I was being really picky for the high-end performance, I like my gunny shoulder board, but it really didn't hold me back.
And that's where sizing matters a lot too,
Yeah.
right? You said you're on the 70 liter Super K, which relative to your weight is more of a performance board size. At our weight, that would be more of a do-it-all size. Even pushing into the performance area, you might own that board and a downwind board if you're not that experienced. But for you, with experience in our conditions, 10 to anything, that's a pretty suitable board. But it wouldn't be that suitable in 100 liters.
No.
Yeah, then it would be
too big.
Light wind only,
So
too big for performance.
That's kind of what I've learned. If you're going to do the one board, because I've given this some serious thought, if I was just going to have one board, I would not go any bigger than the 70 liter hybrid.
Depending on the depends on the model too.
It does.
Yeah.
But for me, the longer, it's really about the length. And when I start seeing stuff over 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", 11, there's a lot more stability there than you believe from front to back. And you can cheat a lower volume board with that. So I'm happy. I know we had this conversation before the video. I'm kind of happy with that hybrid board right now. And now come fall, when we start to get more consistent winds that are like, you know, 18 to 20, 21, 20, in the 20s a lot.
The waves will kick up at that point too.
I am gonna, if I had a choice between my hybrid and the, you know, my go-to charger board, I'm gonna choose that board. But I want to say that if you are thinking about a one board quiver, I do believe the hybrid, if you're in a spot where you get like the winds, like we said, or, you know, anywhere 10, 11 up to 30, you do want to ride, you know, waves and swell.
Yeah, do any jumping
or any of that. The hybrid, I think, is the ticket for that customer.
I'd agree entirely. That's always where I've landed too. Over the years, you know, as a one board quiver, you don't want to miss out on your day-to-day sessions. You don't want to go, I want the board that's perfect for 30 for those 10 days a year. You want to be able to ride, you know, twice a week, but also have, you know,
or weekend warrior,
some acceptable performance.
Yeah.
You know, realistically, you don't need pro level performance if you're an intermediate. So that's a consideration too, is what realistically are you going to achieve going with a different model or a different size. I mean, I can do basically everything on the 70 liter Super K that I can do on a 40 liter high performance
sinker,
lighter sinker.
Yeah.
You know, it's just I have no more problems getting back on foil, riding smaller foils with the Super K. Whereas I might struggle or get worn out faster on the smaller boards.
I think the industry and like the customers really race to that smaller. A lot of people race to that smaller board, and we all did the same thing. We all got better and better, went down to the 50 liter sinker boards, and now, especially with these mid-length boards emerging, we're all kind of realizing that, like we're saying, you can go just a little bit bigger and you don't miss out on your day-to-day session, and you don't get those frustrating days where you're like, is it enough to use this sinker board? You go out there, you spend a lot of time sitting. Now the just a little bit bigger mid-length, you're up and riding all the time, ripping around with very little
drawbacks.
Drawbacks.
And when the wind really picks up, you can still engage and ride.
Yeah, still happy with it. You can still ride that same foil and be happy with it.
I see us selling a lot of those. I mean, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the hot ticket right now.
I mean, for people that live, you know, like we all don't live in the perfect wind spots, wave spots. And I think that hybrid, with the name hybrid, is going to gap and a good range of wind and water conditions and skill sets, meaning skilled riders that we're talking about here.
And it's taken what we've talked about for a long time, right? All the boards we've loved most for the past few years are narrower, thinner,
and
a little longer. Yeah. And this is, some of the mid-lengths are taking that a little bit more extreme for your lower, intermediate, beginner riders, just to make it easier. So you're picking your size based on your ability predominantly and your weight. So let's talk about sizing real quick, because I know we've had this discussion. I definitely feel you want to size down in these boards as a general rule, and it depends on the model.
I agree.
But a 90-liter wingboard, chicken nugget wingboard, is going to have a similar ease of use and accessibility as a 70-liter as a general rule, and it's about the length, really.
And you heard that
70-liter is plenty of volume for somebody our weight
and a hybrid board
and an okay wind, as long as you have that length and that efficiency to plane up, because it's going to lower your center of gravity. You're going to have more body weight in the water, which means more stability. You're not going to get tossed around in the waves as much, but you still have that length, where as soon as that board is moving, man, that thing is on the surface of the water, the volume doesn't matter anymore. So,
and to piggyback on that, I think if you're wanting to go for more performance, meaning you have areas where it does pick up and you have more waves, following that recommendation with a hybrid, size down. If you're stuck to an inland lake and you've heard us talk about these hybrids and you'd like to maybe occasionally travel to the waves and have that experience, and you want to deviate from our recommendation of going with a downwind board, then I might size up just a tad. Not size up, but maybe go where you think you should be with a hybrid. If you're going to be in the reservoir, you're in the lake a lot, but you don't want the canoe, you don't want the longness of the downwind, so you're kind of wanting to go to the hybrid regardless. I would.
Weight in kilograms -20 is kind of the generic for performance in a hybrid. For light wind hybrid usage, where you're not going to ride that thing in over 20, 22, then I think your weight in kilograms is a really nice spot to be. Maybe agree. +10, if you're in a really light, kind of quirky zone. For me, 100 liters is stupid easy to ride. 90 liters is more than enough for my ability. But if you just want it to be, being able to stand there without moving and slog around a little bit and make that really easy without much technique or trouble, the weight in kilograms is a pretty good indicator.
Yeah. So coming full circle, this is really about trying to get you, the customer, on the water and riding more, because you can't get better and you can't enjoy the sport if you're not up and riding.
I've said it 1,000 times, it's not always so much about the gear. It's just about more time on the water. And having the right gear that's suitable for that time is important, of course. But having the latest, greatest, fastest foil a lot of times isn't going to level up your ability unless you're ready for it. But what will level up your ability, hands down, no matter what, no matter who you are, is more time on the water.
Bingo.
When you level up that fun, you're having more time, having more fun, you're riding more, you're getting better. And that's
you get that muscle memory and confidence.
Yeah, more fun, more better.
So there you have it. I think we broke it down quite well. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach us out through phone call, chats, email us. We'll be more than happy to help you as you decide between the downwind, light wind board and the hybrid boards that are on the market.
And stay tuned for some of our reviews. We'll be releasing some mid-length reviews for specific models as well as downwind boards. So stay tuned for those and keep an eye on what some of those options might be, or as Jeff said, give the shop a call here and we can match you with what might be best for you.
Yeah, I already got my gear packed up. My wet's halfway up my legs already.
There we go. Green light means go.
Check, check, check.
Okay.
Check, check.
Check, check. Here we go.
Try to stay on top of Hooker.
All right, my dudes. Fire when ready.
I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.